plans and the bailouts, which are all interfering, right? In order to cure our economy, certain companies need to go bankrupt so that other companies can form. People have to lose jobs so they can get other jobs. And we have to stop spending so we can start saving. If we're going to have factories, if we're going to produce stuff, we need capital. Capital comes from savings and under consumption. So what is the government doing? They're interfering with that process. They're building roadblocks. They're preventing the cure from working, and they're making sure the disease gets worse. But at the same time, they're socializing the economy. They're blaming the problems on capitalism, and they're coming up with big government solutions to problems that were created by government. But now we're making our economy even less efficient. If the government is now running the banking industry, they're running the automobile industry, they're running the insurance industries, they're running all these industries, they're micromanaging, right? It's central government planning. It's not going to work. We can't allocate resources based on politicians trying to get elected or trying to get votes. We need resources allocated by entrepreneurs trying to make a profit. You know, we need to be led by the invisible hand of the market, not the clumsy hand of the state. I mean, look, there was just in the news that I think the post office reported losses of $7 or $8 billion, and they want to eliminate Saturday mail delivery. The government. The post office has been around for, I don't know how many, 100 years or whatever, plus years, and they still can't make a profit. The government can't even deliver the mail and make a profit. How are they going to run AIG or any of these industries? It's lunacy. And here you have Barack Obama. He's talking about the businesses of the future. There's certain industries that he wants to fund, right? How does he know? How does he know what industries to fund? If he was that smart, if he was such a great entrepreneur that he knew exactly what would work, why wasn't he a billionaire? Why is he in politics? Why did he go into government if he knows exactly what products industry should be making? If he can predict in advance, No. Do you think if the government tried to come up with Google, that somebody in the government would have said, we need Google, and we would have had it? Or search engine? No, none of the innovations come from a government decree. The government doesn't know anything. And there's no checks and balances if the government is wrong. Right? If a private entrepreneur makes a mistake, he goes bankrupt. The losses are cut. If he bets wrong, he loses. If the government bets wrong, they just get bigger. They just appropriate more money. It's a bottomless pit because they either get it from the taxpayers or they run it off a printing press. So when private industry makes a mistake, it's corrected and it goes away. As governments make mistakes, they get bigger and bigger and bigger and make more and more and more. Because as they run out of money, they just ask for more. And so you get rewarded for making mistakes. In the meantime, that's exactly what we're doing by subsidizing companies that should be failing, right? We've got a reverse Darwinism. We've got survival of the unfittest. The companies people that have made terrible mistakes are being rewarded. And other people are being punished or taxed. I own a small brokerage firm, Europe Pacific Capital. I don't have any debt. I don't have any toxic assets on my balance sheet. I didn't get all leveraged up. I'm in perfect position, as well as a lot of other small companies that had the good sense not to drink the Fed's alcohol, that acted responsibly. Why aren't we able to come in and pick up the pieces? Why can't we hire a lot of these Wall Street guys away from the firms who made all the mistakes? Well, one of the reasons that we can't is because the government is now subsidizing those companies so they can pay these big retention bonuses to keep their people. Why? Let the companies fail. Do you think there wouldn't be any investment banking if Goldman or Morgan went out of business? Do you think there'd be no brokerage? Do you think we need these gigantic companies? We need them like a hole in the head. Let them fail. The government is making this big deal. Companies are too big to fail. No, they're not. If they're that big and they're that dumb, let them go out of business. They say, the consequences are so horrific. How do we know? Let's see. They're trying to blame this entire collapse on the fact that they let Lehman Brothers fail. And I find that hard to believe. Because look at all the companies we didn't let fail. Look at all the companies we bailed out. Maybe it's because of those bailouts. Maybe letting Lehman Brothers fail was the one thing we did right. But, of course, that's the one thing that they don't want to repeat, because the government wants to get bigger. They don't want to waste this crisis. The Obama administration sees an opportunity to get bigger, to say the government's going to ride to the rescue and save the economy. And that's the problem. We can't afford that rescue. Because when they come to the rescue of the economy, what are they doing? They're going to impede the recovery, they're going to make us less productive, and they're going to make the problems worse. And that's the self-perpetuating spiral. The more the government intervenes, the worse the economy gets, the more they're called on to solve the problem, and the bigger they get. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Every time you throw gasoline, the fire gets bigger. But you can't, you don't make the connection between the gasoline and the bigger fire. So you keep reaching for more gasoline every time the fire gets bigger. And then you get a raging inferno. But unfortunately, that's the only way the government knows how to put out a fire, is by pouring on gasoline. What we got to do is stop. Unfortunately, there's only one real solution to the problem, and it's the one solution that we're not going to adopt, and that's let the market function. Let the recession run its course. Let companies go bankrupt. Let Americans stop spending. Let them start saving. Take the recession and deal with the consequences right now. The one thing the government could do, if it really wanted to help, would be to shrink, because the government is a burden on the economy. We have to produce enough to support the government. Right? The government doesn't produce anything. So we have to be productive enough to support them. And if, in good times, maybe you can afford a lot of government. It does damage, but maybe you can afford it. We certainly can't afford it now. So we need smaller government. We need the government to contract, to stop spending money on the military, to spend less domestically, to actually abolish entire departments, to shrink. And if it shrinks enough, it could deliver real tax cuts to the American people, which we probably need. I think we desperately need. But we can't pretend to give people tax cuts. If we just cut their taxes, but the government keeps right on spending, then the cost of government is still there. Because the cost of government is not what it taxes, but what it spends. And if it doesn't take us from us in taxation, it's going to take us through inflation. Right? It's just going to print money. And if we print money and spend it, we're not getting all that government for free. The government is robbing us of our savings. It's robbing us of our investments. It's robbing us of our wages. It's stealing the purchasing power out from under us and then giving it back selectively. And we're all getting poorer. So the consequence of what the government is doing, as I said, I think is going to be the real economic collapse. I think what's going to happen over the next several years is the foreigners who have been lending us money, who have been buying up our debt, are going to stop doing it. And more of our debt's going to be monetized. And as that starts to happen, prices are really going to start to rise. In the short run, we haven't seen consumer prices rising that much. Why haven't they risen? Well, we've had forces that have been pushing them down. We've had bankruptcies, we've had going out of business sales, liquidation, deleveraging. All these things have been suppressing prices. At the same time, the government inflation, which is the creation of money, has been pushing prices up. It's like if somebody is, eating a high-carb diet, but they're constantly exercising, they don't gain any weight. They kind of have two forces that are working in equilibrium. Well, if they stop exercising and keep eating, well, then they're going to get fat. And the same thing is going to happen in the U.S. The forces that are pushing prices down are temporary. Eventually, the companies that are going out of business, they're out of business. Eventually, the companies that had excess inventory and they slashed prices to get rid of it, the inventory is gone. The deleveraging is going to run its course. The dollar is going to stop strengthening and start falling. It was the strengthening dollar that temporarily kept our prices down. When the dollar resumes its descent, that will be pushing upward pressure on prices. So prices are going to start to rise. As prices start to rise, I don't know if the government's going to pick it up in its CPI. I guess the CPI is so manipulated. But people are going to start to notice it. And as prices start to rise, lenders want higher interest rates because now they're afraid of inflation. I mean, over the last 6 months, people have been afraid of owning assets. They've wanted safety. They're risk averse. They've been moving to the perceived safety of cash. But once they realize that there's no safety in cash, particularly the dollar, once they realize that the dollar is being inflated, they're not going to want cash. They're going to want to get out of cash. They're going to want stuff. And if they're going to want cash, they're going to want to be paid a very high rate of interest to hold that cash. In 1980, when Volcker first came in, and we tried to clean up the mess of the Great Society and Nixon and Jimmy Carter, he had to put interest rates up to 20% to convince people to hold on to our bonds. It's not like when Volcker came in and he tried to figure out what would be a good interest rate for everybody, what would help out the economy. And